Regional economic integration. This chapter focuses on regional efforts to encourage free trade and investment. Regional integration is defined, and its benefits and drawbacks are identified. The chapter also explores several long-established trading agreements and some agreements in the earlier stages of development. What is regional economic integration? Regional economic integration is countries of a region cooperating to reduce or eliminate barriers to the international flow of products, people, or capital. A regional trading bloc is a group of nations in a geographic region undergoing economic integration. The goal is greater cross-border trade and investment and higher living standards. Specialization and trade allow more choice, lower prices, and increased productivity. Regional trade agreements help nations accomplish these objectives and protect intellectual property rights, the environment, or even eventual political union. Levels of regional integration. There are 5 levels of regional integration. Free trade area is the lowest extent of national integration. Political union is the greatest. Each level of integration incorporates the properties of those levels that preceded. Free trade area. Countries remove all barriers to trade among members, but each country determines its own barriers against non-members. Policies differ greatly against non-member countries from one country to another. Countries in a free trade area also establish a process to resolve trade disputes between members. Customs union. Countries remove all barriers to trade among members, but erect a common trade policy against non-members. A customs union differs from a free trade area in that members treat all non-members similarly. Countries might also negotiate as a single entity with other supranational organizations such as the WTO. Common market. Countries remove all barriers to trade and the movement of labor and capital among themselves, but erect a common trade policy against non-members. A common market adds the free movement of important factors of production, such as people and cross-border investment. It can be difficult for nations to cooperate on economic and labor policies. Economic union. Countries remove barriers to trade and the movement of labor and capital, erect a common trade policy against non-members, and coordinate their economic policies. An economic union requires members to harmonize their tax, monetary, and fiscal policies, create a common currency, and concede a certain amount of sovereignty to the supranational organization. Political union. Countries coordinate aspects of economic and political systems. Members accept a common stance on economic and political policies regarding non-member nations. Nations are allowed a degree of freedom in setting certain political and economic policies within their territories. There are debates over the effect of regional economic integration on people, jobs, companies, culture, and living standards. Let's take a closer look at the main benefits of integration. Nations engage in specialization and trade because of the gains in output and consumption. High levels of trade between nations should increase specialization, efficiency and consumption, and raise standards of living. Trade creation. Trade creation is the increase in trade that results from regional economic integration. It gives consumers and industrial buyers a wider selection of goods and services not available beforehand. Buyers can acquire goods and services more cheaply following the lowering of trade barriers such as tariffs. Lower costs lead to higher demand for goods because people have more money after a purchase to buy other products. Greater consensus. Eliminating trade barriers in smaller groups of countries may make it easier to gain consensus as opposed to working in the far larger WTO. Political cooperation. A group of nations can have significantly greater political weight than nations have individually. The group may have more clout in negotiating in a forum like the WTO. Integration involving political cooperation reduces the potential for military conflict among members. Employment opportunities. Regional integration can expand employment by enabling people to move from country to country for work or to earn a higher wage. Let's now examine the potential drawbacks of regional integration. Trade diversion. Trade diversion is the diversion of trade away from nations not belonging to a trading bloc and toward member nations. Trade diversion can occur after formation of a trading bloc because of the lower tariffs charged between member nations. Trade diversion can result in reduced trade with a more efficient non-member nation in favor of trade with a less efficient member nation. Unless there is other internal competition, buyers will pay more due to inefficient production methods. Shifts in employment. Because trading blocs reduce or eliminate barriers to trade, the producer of a particular good or service will be decided by relative productivity. Industries requiring unskilled labor shift production to low-wage nations within a trading bloc. Figures on jobs lost or gained vary with the source. But job dislocation allows a nation to upgrade the economy toward higher wage-paying industries that can increase competitiveness due to a more educated and skilled workforce. Loss of national sovereignty. Successive levels of integration require nations to surrender more sovereignty. Political union requires nations to give up a high degree of sovereignty in foreign policy. Because some members have delicate ties with non-member nations, whereas others have strong ties, the setting of a common foreign policy is difficult. For a small recall, try to answer this question. What are several potential benefits of regional economic integration and several potential drawbacks of integration? Potential benefits of regional economic integration include trade creation, greater consensus, political cooperation, and job creation. Potential drawbacks include trade diversion, shifting employment, and lost sovereignty. Integration in Europe. European efforts at integration began shortly after the Second World War among a small group of countries and involved a few select industries. Regional integration now encompasses practically all of Western Europe and all industries. Today, the 27-member European Union has a population of about 500 million people and a GDP of around $15 trillion. European Union early years. Europe in 1945 faced two challenges. It needed to rebuild itself and avoid further conflict, and to increase its industrial strength to stay competitive with the United States. Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands signed the Treaty of Paris in 1951, creating the European Coal and Steel Community to remove barriers to trade in coal, iron, steel, and scrap metal. Members of the European Coal and Steel Community signed the Treaty of Rome in 1957, creating the European Economic Community (EEC), which outlined a future common market. In 1967, the community's scope was broadened to include additional industries, notably atomic energy, and changed its name to the European Community. The Single European Act of 1987 removed remaining barriers, increased harmonization, and enhanced competitiveness of European Union companies. Mergers and acquisitions swept Europe as large firms combined the understanding of European needs, capabilities, and cultures with economies of scale. And in 1991, members signed the Maastricht Treaty, which created a single common currency, set monetary and fiscal targets for countries taking part in monetary union, and proposed eventual political union, including a common foreign and defense policy and common citizenship. Enlargement continued, and in 1994, the bloc changed its name to the European Union. As stated previously, European Union leaders were determined to create a single common currency. European Monetary Union is the European Union plan that established its own central bank and currency in January 1999. Opting out of the euro are Britain, Denmark, and Sweden. The euro eliminates exchange rate risk for business deals among member nations using the euro. Transparency in prices harmonizes prices across markets. When doing business in Central Europe, remain formal in your relations unless your colleagues encourage informality. Smooth the way for business by building close relationships and establishing solid references. Find a local partner to help you with the inevitable difficulties of cross-cultural business. Hire local professionals and establish who is in charge so that people know who to turn to when needed. Enlargement of the European Union. One of the most historic events across Europe is the expansion in 2004 and 2007 from 15 to 27 members today. Candidates for membership are Croatia, Turkey, and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. New members must meet the Copenhagen criteria. Structure of the European Union. 5 institutions play key roles in monitoring and enforcing integration in the European Union. European Parliament. The European Parliament consists of 736 members elected by popular vote within each member nation every 5 years. The Parliament acts as a consultative rather than a legislative body by debating and amending legislation proposed by the European Commission. Council of the European Union. The Council of the European Union is the legislative body of the European Union. Council members change depending on the topic under discussion. Example for agriculture, the Council is comprised of agriculture ministers of each member. No proposed legislation becomes European Union law unless the Council votes it into law. Some legislation today requires only a simple majority to win approval. European Commission. The European Commission is the executive body of the European Union, whose commissioners are appointed by each country. Larger nations get 2 commissioners, smaller nations get 1. The European Commission drafts legislation, manages and implements policy, and monitors compliance with EU law. The Court of Justice. The Court of Justice acts as the EU Court of Appeals and is composed of 27 members, 1 from each member nation. One type of case heard is when a member nation is accused of not meeting its treaty obligations. Justices are required to act in the interest of the EU as a whole, not in the interest of their own countries. The Court of Auditors. The Court of Auditors is composed of 27 members, 1 from each member nation, appointed for 6-year terms. Duty is to audit EU accounts and implement EU budget, improve EU financial management, and report to member nations' citizens on the use of public funds. European Free Trade Association. Some nations wanted the benefit of a free trade area but were wary of a full common market. In 1960, they formed the European Free Trade Association EFTA to focus on trade in industrial goods. Today, members are Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. The EFTA has 12.5 million people and a combined GDP of $707 billion. The EFTA and EU cooperate on the free movement of goods, persons, services, and capital. They also cooperate in other areas, including the environment, social policy, and education. Now fill in the blank by choosing among the three words below. The correct answer is C. All future members of the European Union must meet what are called the Copenhagen criteria, which demonstrate a country's readiness for membership. Integration in the Americas. Latin American countries began forming regional trading arrangements in the early 1960s, but made substantial progress only in the 1980s and 1990s. North America is taking major steps toward economic integration. North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. The NAFTA took effect on January 1994 and seeks to eliminate most tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers on most goods originating from North America. The agreement calls for liberalized rules regarding government procurement practices, the granting of subsidies, and the imposition of countervailing duties. Other provisions deal with trade in services, intellectual property rights, and standards of health, safety, and the environment. Local content requirements and rules of origin. Producers and distributors must determine if their products meet NAFTA rules to qualify for tariff-free status. The producer or distributor must also provide a NAFTA certificate of origin to an importer to claim an exemption from tariffs. 4 criteria to meet NAFTA rules of origin include goods wholly produced or obtained in the NAFTA region, goods containing non-originating inputs but meeting origin rules, goods produced in the NAFTA region wholly from originating materials, and unassembled goods with sufficient North American regional value content. Effects of NAFTA. Trade among Canada, Mexico, and the United States has grown from $297 billion in 1993 to around $1 trillion. Mexico's export to the United States rose to about $211 billion, and U.S. export to Mexico grew to more than $136 billion. Canada's exports to the United States more than doubled to approximately $300 billion, and U.S. exports to Canada grew to $176 billion. Canada's export to Mexico grew more than threefold to nearly $2.7 billion. The agreement's effect on employment and wages is not easy to determine. The U.S. Trade Representative Office and the AFL-CIO group of unions debate NAFTA's effect on jobs. Expansion of NAFTA. Continued ambivalence about NAFTA delays its expansion. A boost would be if the U.S. Congress grants trade promotion authority to successive U.S. presidents. The Americas will experience further integration, and North American economies could even adopt a single currency. Central American Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA-DR. The Central American Free Trade Agreement was established in 2006 between the United States and Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic. CAFTA nations represent a U.S. export market larger than India, Indonesia, and Russia combined, and nearly 80% of exports from the Central American nations and the Dominican Republic already enter the United States tariff-free. Central American nations have already cut average tariffs from 45% in 1985 to around 7% today. the combined value of goods traded among the United States and the 6 CAFTA countries is around $32 billion. The agreement benefits the United States in several ways. CAFTA-DR aims to lower tariff and non-tariff barriers. It also ensures that U.S. companies are not disadvantaged by Central American nations' trade agreements with other countries. It requires Central American nations and Dominican Republic to encourage competition and investment, protect intellectual property rights, and promote transparency and the rule of law. It supports U.S. national security interests by advancing regional integration, peace, and stability. CAFTA-DR effects. The Central American Free Trade Agreement has supporters and detractors. Supporters say that the agreement encourages trade efficiency and promotes investment that brings high-paying jobs to the poorer member nations. Detractors fear that the agreement benefits large U.S. companies and damages farmers and small businesses across Central America. Indian Community. The Indian community was formed in 1969 and today includes Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. It comprises a market of around 97 million consumers and a combined GDP of about $220 billion. Objectives include tariff reduction, a common external tariff, and common policies in both transportation and certain industries. But each member is given exceptions in the common tariff structure for trade with non-members. The group has yet to create a customs union. Southern Common Market. Mercosur. Mercosur members include Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Venezuela. Associate members include Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. Mercosur acts as a customs union and liberalizing trade and investment. It is emerging as the most powerful trading bloc throughout Latin America. Mercosur may incorporate all of South America into a South American Free Trade Agreement and link up with NAFTA. Different trade agendas, various macroeconomic policy frameworks, and economic problem of Argentina and Brazil hamper integration. Central America and the Caribbean. Integration efforts here have been modest. Caribbean Community and Common Market, CARICOM. CARICOM formed in 1973. Bahamas is a member of the community but does not belong to the Common Market. CARICOM has a combined GDP of nearly $30 billion and a market of almost 6 million people. In year 2000, CARICOM members called for the establishment of a single market, but the problem is that members trade more with non-members than with one another. Central American Common Market, CACM. The CACM intended to create a common market between Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Progress was constrained by civil wars and wars among members. It comprises a market of 33 million and a combined GDP of $120 billion. The CACM is not yet a customs union, but officials say goal is integration, closer political ties, and a single currency, likely the dollar. El Salvador adopted the dollar as its official currency in 2000. Free Trade Area of the Americas, FTAA. The FTAA intends to create a trading bloc stretching from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego in South America. The FTAA will comprise 34 nations and 830 million consumers, with Cuba being the only Western Hemisphere nation excluded. It would remove tariffs and non-tariff barriers among members, but continues to face opposition from labor organizations, environmentalists, and others against globalization. Now recall what you've just heard and try to answer this question. What is the objective of the free trade area of the Americas, and what are its prospects for success? The free trade area of the Americas intends to create a trading bloc stretching from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego in South America. The free trade area would likely supersede all existing trading blocs in North, Central, and South America, but it continues to face opposition from labor organizations, environmentalists, and others opposed to globalization. Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations represents a market of 560 million consumers and a gross domestic product of $1.1 trillion. Its stated objectives are to promote economic, cultural, and social development, safeguard economic and political stability, and serve as a forum in which differences can be resolved fairly and peacefully. Adding members Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar may help counter China's strength and resources of cheap labor and abundant raw materials. Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC. The APEC comprises more than 40% of world trade and a GDP of more than $19 trillion. It aims to strengthen the multilateral trading system and expand the global economy by simplifying and liberalizing trade and investment procedures. It hopes to have completely free trade and investment throughout the region by 2020. Record of APEC. The Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation has succeeded in having members' tariff rates from an average of 15 to 7.5%, with less progress more recently. It is a political body as much as it is a movement toward free trade. Open dialogue and cooperation should encourage progress toward goals, however slowly. It grants region-wide business visas without requiring multiple visas, and recommends regional recognition of national qualification for professionals. Closer Economic Relations Agreement. Australia and New Zealand created a free trade agreement in 1966 that slashed tariffs and quotas 80% by 1980. The agreement's success encouraged the pair to form the Closer Economic Relations Agreement in 1983 to advance free trade and further integrate their two economies. The two nations totally eliminated tariffs and quotas in 1990, 5 years ahead of schedule. Each nation allows goods and most services to be sold within its borders that can be legally sold in the other country. Each nation also recognizes most professionals who are registered to practice their occupation in the other country. Integration in the Middle East. Gulf Cooperation Council. The Gulf Cooperation Council members are Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. It formed to cooperate with the increasingly powerful trading blocs in Europe. The Gulf Cooperation Council allows citizens to travel freely among member nations. It also allows citizens to own land, businesses, and other property in fellow member nations without the need for local partners. Integration in Africa. Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. ECOWAS intends to form a customs union and an eventual common market and monetary union among its members. The ECOWAS nations comprise a large portion of the economic activity in sub-Saharan Africa. Progress on market integration is almost non-existent, but ECOWAS has made progress in the free movement of people, construction of international roads, and development of telecommunication links. Problems for ECOWAS arise because of political instability, poor governance, weak national economies, poor infrastructure, and poor economic policies. African Union. Another group of 53 nations joined forces in 2002 to create the African Union. It aims to rid vestiges of colonialism and apartheid, promote unity and solidarity, coordinate and intensify cooperation for development, safeguard member sovereignty and territorial integrity, and promote international cooperation within the United Nations. Choose the correct answer. What is the name of the group of 21 nations that ring the Pacific Ocean, whose stated aims do not include formation of a formal free trade bloc? The correct answer is B, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. This chapter describes regional integration efforts occurring today. There is much debate about the merits and demerits of regional trade agreements. Some governments and independent organizations act to counter the negative effects of integration. Although there are drawbacks to integration, governments will continue to be enticed by the potential gains from increased trade and by the desire to raise standards of living. Regional economic integration will likely continue to roll back barriers to trade between nations and between existing trading blocs of nations.